So the next story is hold on, the Steadfast Tin Soldier. So have some tea. I'm gonna get some for a second. There were once 25 tin soldiers, who were all brothers, for they were born together of an old tin spoon. They had guns at the shoulder, looked straight before them, and their uniform was very pretty, being red and blue. The very first word they heard in this world, tin soldiers, was when the lid was taken off the box in which they lay, and that was exclaimed by a little boy who was clapping his hands, the tin soldiers being his birthday present. He stood them up on the table. Each one was like the other, only one being different, having only one leg, as he had been cast last, and there was no more tin. But he stood nevertheless as firmly on his one leg as the others on their two, and it is of him we shall tell. On the table where they stood there was a lot of other playthings, but that which attracted the eye most was a pretty castle made of cardboard. Through the little windows you could see right into the rooms, and outside stood tiny trees around a little looking glass, which was meant for a lake, and which reflected some wax swans upon it. It was also very pretty, but still prettier was a little maiden, standing in the open door, and cut from cardboard, but she had on a dress of the finest muslin, and a little blue sash across her shoulders, in the middle of which was fastened a glittering tinsel star as big as her face. The little maiden stretched out both her arms, for she was a dancer, and she raised one leg so high that the tin soldier could not see it, so he thought that she too had only one leg like himself. That would be just the wife for me, he thought, but she is high-born and lives in a castle, while I have only a box, and that there are 25 of us to share. It is not a fit place for her, but I will nevertheless try to make her acquaintance. And he laid himself down behind a snuff box on the table, whence he could have a real good look at the pretty little lady, who continued to stand on one leg without overbalancing herself. And I get some more tea. So that's an illustration there. Don't know who that guy is. I guess I'm gonna read about him soon enough. Anyways, at night the rest of the tin soldiers were put into the box, and the family in the house went to bed. Then the playthings began to play amongst themselves at giving at homes, dances, and go to war, so that the tin soldiers began to kick in their box, as they wanted to share the fun. But they could not get the lid off. The nutcrackers turned somersaults, while the pencil danced a hornpipe on the slate, and there was such a noise that the canary woke and began to join in, and that in verse 2 the only two who remained quiet were the tin soldier and the little dancer. She stood still, erect on the tip of her toe, with her arms stretched out, and he as firmly on his one leg, but he did not take his eyes off her for an instant. Just then the clock struck 12, and bang, the lid flew off in the snuff box. There was, however, no snuff in it, only a little black imp, like a jack-in-the-box. "Tin soldier," said the imp, "you keep your eyes to yourself." But the soldier pretended not to hear him. "Well, you just wait till tomorrow," said the imp. The next morning, as soon as the children were up, the tin soldier was placed on the window ledge, and whether it was the imp or the draught, anyhow, the window suddenly flew open, and the soldier fell headlong from the second story into the street. It was a frightful fall. He held his leg straight upward and landed on his shako, with his gun embedded between two paving stones. The servant and the little boy went down at once to find him, but though they nearly trod upon him, they could not see him. Had the tin soldier called out, "I am here," they would have found him, no doubt, but he did not consider it soldier-like to shout while in uniform. It began to rain, the drops falling faster and faster, and it soon came down in torrents. When the rain was over, 2 street urchins came along, one of whom exclaimed, "Look, there lies a tin soldier. Let us give him a sail in the gutter." And they made a boat out of a piece of newspaper, put the soldier in it, and so he sailed down the gutter, both boys running alongside, clapping. There's another illustration there. Get some more tea. Clapping their hands. Oh, how high the waves ran in the gutter, and how strong the current was. But it had been pouring down. The paper boat bobbed up and down, and sometimes spun round so fearfully that the soldier trembled, and he remained firm, and not moving a muscle, and looking straight before him, kept his gun at the shoulder. Suddenly the boat drifted under a broad crossing, and it became as dark as in the box. "Where am I going to now, I wonder?" he thought. "I am sure this is the imp's doing. However, if only the little girl was in the boat with me, it might really be twice as dark." Now a large water rat appeared, which lived under the crossing. "Have you a pass?" it asked. "Hand it over." But the tin soldier did not say a word, and only clasped his gun firmer. The boat shot along, and the rat followed. Oh, how fearfully it ground its teeth, while calling out to bits of wood and straw, stop him, he has not paid toll, he has not shown a pass." But the current became stronger and stronger. The tin soldier now saw daylight where the crossing ceased, but he heard also a roaring noise, which might well terrify the bravest. Only imagine, where the crossing ceased, the water in the gutter fell straight into a big canal, a descent as dangerous as that of a waterfall to us. Now he was so near it, he could not stop the boat, and down it went. But the poor tin soldier remained as firm as he possibly could. Nobody could say that he even blinked his eyes. The boat spun round 3 or 4 times, filled nearly to the edge, and it was on the point of sinking. The tin soldier was in water up to his neck, while the boat sank deeper and deeper. The paper became more and more undone, and now the water was above the head of the soldier. At that moment he thought of the pretty little dancer, whom he should never see again. Now the paper broke, he fell through, and he was at that same instant swallowed by a big fish. Oh, how dark it was in there, much darker than under the crossing, and so little room too. But the tin soldier remained steadfast, lying full length with his gun in his arm. The fish jumped about in the most violent manner, but all of a sudden it became quiet, and something like a ray of light penetrated into it. The light became quite distinct, and somebody said aloud, "The tin soldier." The fish had been caught, sold in the fish market, carried into the kitchen where the cook was cutting it up with a big knife. She took him with her 2 fingers and carried him to the sitting room, where everybody wished to see the remarkable being who had travelled about in the stomach of a fish. But the tin soldier was not at all proud. They placed him on the table. Wonder of wonders, the tin soldier was in the same room as before. He saw the same children and the same playthings on the table. The fine castle and the pretty little dancer were still there. She was still on one leg, with the other high in the air. She too was firm. The tin soldier was so affected he could have cried, but that would not have been soldier-like. He looked at her, and she at him, but neither said anything. In the next moment, one of the little boys threw the soldier, without giving any reason, right into the fire. It was no doubt the imp's doing again. The tin soldier stood in the full glare and felt a heat quite dreadful, but whether it was the fire or love he knew not. He had quite lost his colours, but nobody could tell whether on the journey or through grief. He looked at the little maiden, and she at him. He felt he was melting, but still he stood firm with his gun at his shoulder. And just then a door was opened, and the draught catching the dancer, she flew like a sylph right into the fire, where the soldier stood, blazed up, and disappeared. The tin soldier had now melted into a lump, and when the servant in the next morning cleared out the ashes, she found him in the form of a tin heart, while of the dancer only a tinsel star remained, and that was burned quite black.